With Darbenzio's family in the courtroom looking on, Aazis Richardson spoke, saying, quote, "What I said to the media I didn't mean. I was just trying to show off. If I could take it back, I would." He's referring to the comments, but not the murder. The other Christmas Day 2013 mass shooting took place as the joyous holiday dawned around 12:30 a.m. at Slick's Go-Go Bar in Irvington. 19-year-old Anthony Field was identified by witnesses as the gunman who shot 5, killing 3. According to his appeal, Anthony Field knew several of the patrons as well as the individuals performing that night. A woman had reportedly witnessed the bouncer frisk him at the door, then tell him that he couldn't enter the club with a gun visible in his waistband. As she smoked, she saw him walk away while at the door a scuffle with the bouncer over the cover charge broke out and shots rang out quickly after. She saw the melee ensue and the owner's son jump over the bar to get in closer. As the brawl spilled outside, the shooter then reappeared, walked to the middle of the street and opened fire on the mass now at the sidewalk. The bouncer was shot and killed, and the acquaintance ran to his car with another mutual friend, at which time Anthony Field also got in the car and demanded a ride at gunpoint. His girlfriend indicated that he returned home in the early morning hours of Christmas Day and told her that he might be in trouble. She said he left again but came back in the afternoon with presents for their children before leaving again and leaving the state without her knowledge. He was apprehended by the FBI 2.5 weeks later at his mother's home in Orlando, Florida, and was convicted almost 3 years later, found guilty on charges of murder, aggravated manslaughter, and aggravated assault. His consecutive sentences were 45 years, 27 years, 18 years, and 2 sentences of 4.5 years for a total of 99 years. Anthony Field is 26 years old and will be eligible for parole on January 16, 2067. 32-year-old United States Army veteran Woodley Daniel was identified as the slain club employee working the door and was remembered by family members as being a dreamer. Also killed that night was 34-year-old Pierre Clervoyant Jr., a college-educated city worker and son of the club's owner, who mentored those in his community to stay away from guns. And 27-year-old Mushir Cureton, whose family is no stranger to the consequences of gun violence. 2 years after Mushir's Christmas Day murder, his 7-year-old cousin was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting in southwest Miami-Dade County, Florida, and another cousin was considered the instigator. It was Christmas weekend 2015, and 7-year-old Amiere Castro had gone for a holiday visit to a relative's home. They'd only recently moved to Florida from Allentown, Pennsylvania. 19-year-old Dravein Duke, who was on probation for trying to sell stolen exotic reptiles while armed, was determined to have been the shooter. He allegedly fired from a truck being driven by 18-year-old Maxwell Trewin. The pair were part of a group who had gone to the home earlier that day. Dravein Duke got into an argument with Amiere Castro's 19-year-old cousin Michael Tobler Jr., who lived at the home the little boy would visit in the afternoon. It's reported that the argument was about a stolen gun but took place while Tobler was in the process of selling them marijuana. He reportedly fired at the truck full of teens as they left the scene. They returned around 3:30 p.m. and Dravein Duke opened fire on the home with an AK-47, killing the little boy. He was shot in the head as he played in the living room of his relative's home with his 12-year-old brother, as their mother was driving over to pick them up. Michael Tobler Jr., who was alleged to have shot first, the truck's driver, Maxwell Trewin, and the retaliation shooter, Dravein Duke, were all arrested in connection with his murder. The driver, Maxwell Trewin, is 23 years old and is incarcerated at South Bay Correctional Facility in South Bay, Florida, with a current release date of April 2030. Michael Tobler Jr. was released in February of 2020. The shooter, Dravein Duke, was ultimately convicted of second-degree murder, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, and weapons charges. He is 24 years old and serving his sentences at Charlotte Correctional Institution in Punta Gorda, Florida, with a release scheduled for July 15, 2042, when he will be 45 years old. The 7-year-old's death was actually the third time members of this extended family would grieve for a loved one struck down by bullets, as just over 4 years before that, Amiere Castro's 20-year-old cousin Marcus Eggleston was shot and killed in Allentown, Pennsylvania, in a targeted shooting found to be a paternity dispute. The victim and the shooter thought they were the biological father of a baby born to a woman they were both dating. On July 19, 2011, Marcus Eggleston's mother, who was Amiere Castro's aunt, had been called to the house her son was at because there was concern that 18-year-old Uriah O'Carroll was looking to start trouble. The teen and her 20-year-old son had reportedly already argued earlier in the evening, and Uriah had fought with Marcus's friends. It was after this that his mother arrived at the home. About an hour later, Marcus exited the residence and Uriah was waiting approximately 10 feet away. He reportedly yelled, "Uriah's got a gun," before turning to run back into the home, at which point he was shot in the back. The bullet struck a lung and his heart. The victim's mother saw Uriah shoot her son before he next shot into the house, grazing the top of her head and striking an artery, a wound which she luckily survived. Uriah O'Carroll avoided a first-degree murder trial and a possible life sentence by pleading guilty to third-degree murder and attempted homicide, with charges for shooting into the occupied home dropped. He was sentenced to the maximum, 40 to 80 years in prison. Judge Maria Dantos said at sentencing that had the plea agreement not kept her from doing so, she would have sent the teen to prison for life. The district attorney stated that O'Carroll had several opportunities to get on the right path after 4 juvenile arrests, however, he never followed through. The teen had been evaluated by a specialist who said that Uriah described being abandoned by his father at a very young age, then watching his mother date abusive men, which changed him as a boy, telling him, quote, "My mother didn't raise me to be a murderer, but I had things did to me and I saw things did in front of me. I became angry and I got a dark side." Marcus Eggleston's sister held up a photo of him to his killer's face at sentencing, saying, quote, "Why would you do this? I want to know if you're sorry. I want him to look at it. Is he sorry?" O'Carroll failed to answer her, but said that he was sorry when it was his turn to speak, going on to say that he, quote, "tried to die that night too, but the empty gun kept me alive." When it was Marcus's mother's turn to speak, the survivor looked at her shooter and her son's killer and said that she would have to forgive him if she wanted to move on with her own life, but added, quote, "One day when you finally wake up from the smog of your life and realized I killed an innocent person for some chick, ask yourself, was it worth it?" Uriah O'Carroll is now 28 and is housed at the State Correctional Institution at Fayette in LaBelle, Pennsylvania. Aazis Richardson is now 22 years old and is serving out his sentence at the State Correctional Institution at Albion, Pennsylvania. He won't be eligible for parole until he's 62 years old. As always, thanks for listening. This episode wraps up 2020 and 3 straight years of Murderous Minors episodes. Thank you to my listeners for coming back and growing with me, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for all of us. I'll be back soon with an all-new episode, but until then, lovelies, don't be scared.